So as part of Module 7, we'll discuss about Recovery Services Vault. So one of the most service which is required in Azure, and every organization or every maybe an individual who's using an Azure would need this Recovery Services Vault. So we'll try to understand what exactly it is and how it can help us. So in the on-premises, so we have AD server, we have like in SQL database server, DB server, or could be some Exchange VM, Exchange, okay, a VMware VM, and could be like you have a file share, a Windows server with a file share. Like there could be a lot of servers which exist in the on-prem. So when we have an AD server, if it goes down, then we would see some kind of an issue with the entire network where users are not able to access the applications and connect with other devices, or like many issues. Similarly, if SQL DB server goes down for some reasons, it could be a virus attack, it could be a ransomware attack, it could be a database corruption, or it could be a manual error or a human error, any kind of thing, someone deleted a database or something, then we would see that a huge risk where the organization data, maybe some kind of a customer data is being lost. Similarly, we have Exchange and email content. If the Exchange server gets corrupt for some reasons, then we would see we will not be able to send in emails or receive emails. Like there are so many services which we used to use in the on-prem where we are using it. Now, how do we back up? So now in the on-prem, we have a backup server. So this like a backup server, like what we call as a VM or a net backup or an HP. Okay. Like there are so many backup tools which are semantic, backup exe. Like there are so many tools which we use it to back up this particular data. So to automate this backup system, we use like a backup server, and top of the backup server, we install some kind of a VM or a net backup or semantic backup exe or HP data protector or system center data protector. There are so many tools which are available. So what these tools will help us basically to automate, will basically automate the backup process. So I want to ensure that these servers are being secured. When I mean from a data, if something goes wrong with these servers, I should be able to restore it. Now, where do we need to take backup now? The target location. So the backup server, these are the source where it has to take the backup and where it has to store. Now, one option, we were using a tape cartridges. So we were is basically using a tape cartridges, which are basically cheap and basically can preserve for a longer run, can move from one location to another location, but the recovery process is very slow. So when we are writing a data into tape cartridge, it takes a longer time, and we're restoring a data from a tape cartridge, it takes a longer time. Again, you have to keep in mind recovery time objective. So we were calling it as an RTO. Now, does the saving a data in a tape cartridges, will it meet the RTO? Then we have like a SAN storage where we would SAN or a NAS storage, a storage device, so which helps us in faster read-write operations. Now, if I have an 30 terabyte capacity of data which needs to be backup, and if I want to take it into tape cartridges, it may take a 12 hours of time. But if I save the backups into a SAN or a NAS storage, then it would take roughly around 3 hours of time. So to save the time and also recovery time objectives and also faster backup process, so we used to have called as a SAN or NAS storage devices. So what this will do, so the backup a tool will take the data from the source and make a copy of it into a destination. Now the based on the source data and the jobs which we are running, so it is going to use it based on the backup policies we define in the backup server, whether we want to save it in a tape cartridge or a SAN or these things or no. Sometimes we make a multiple copies of it. So what do? Is then we do a multiple copies. So first I will write the data into a SAN NAS storage. Then I'll say that, okay, slowly from a SAN storage, let me move it to a tape cartridge. So what is the advantage of it? Because during the backup process, we have a performance impact on the source, the AD server or a SQL DB. So I should be able to back up the data as early as possible so that my performance of the server is not impacted, the users are not impacted. So for that purpose, we initially take a backup to a SAN storage. Instead of taking 10 to 12 hours of time for a backup time, I can complete the backup in 3 hours of time. But what happens if this storage also gets corrupt for some reasons? Because this storage will be live and it can be part of the network. And what happens if something goes wrong with this storage device? So what we used to do is then we used to have called as tape cartridges. As a first step, we take a backup to a SAN or a NAS storage. Then second step, we say that from a SAN storage, move it to the tape cartridges. So what happens with this one is then the backup time will be faster, and one copy is being stored in a SAN or a NAS storage for a faster retrieval. As a safer purpose, we are making one more copy as a tape cartridges, and we might move this to in another data center or to another location where something goes wrong with this entire data center. We have a physical copy of a tape cartridge which is available in some another location, which is not damaged or which is not tampered. So that way we used to have these kind of backup policies, backup infrastructure in place in the on-premises. Now, when it comes to the Azure, now we are running in Azure virtual machines, SQL databases, SAP applications, Oracle applications, like many applications on Azure cloud. The question is in the Azure will not guarantee you for the data which is being stored in Azure. He will only give you an uptime that how long this VM can be up and running in a given year. But if you have not properly been maintained, there is a possibility of that. There is a virus attack. There is a possibility of human errors because we interact with these servers. Now, how do we basically protect from all these kind of issues in Azure? So that is where we come with something called as an Azure Recovery Services Vault. So the Azure Recovery Services Vault is basically a storage location in Azure region or a location. It is a storage location or a storage. So it is basically like where you called as a storage area within the Azure. When a given basically region could be Central India or some West India or West US or East US like that. So this provides a storage space for backup data. So it basically allocates, or I would say called as it consumes, a backend storage to store all these backup jobs. So it helps us in backing up data such as your virtual machines, SQL servers, managed instances, databases, whatever you are running an application services, could be a platform as a services, and as well as your an infrastructure as a service VMs. Okay, so you can take a backup to these particular ones. And it consists of backup component like backup jobs. So when we go to the on-prem, we have a backup server. The backup server running a backup application. The backup application will maintain the backup jobs, backup policies, retention policies. Okay. All these things will be maintained by this server. Now in Azure, the recovery server service vault, the services vault, what we call as an, will maintain all these kind of things like the backup jobs, the backup source, what content to be backed up, what software you're going to use it, and how long we want to protect the data. We don't want to overwrite these backup jobs. And it helps basically restore jobs and all these things with the help of the backup jobs. Even these third-party backup softwares like Veeam, NetBackup, Semantic Backup EXE, like other tools, HB Data Protector, they are also available in Azure. So those tools also will use recovery services vault as the destination. So these tools can basically use this recovery services vault to store the data, okay, in Azure locations. And all the configurations and schedules and protection information, what virtual machines are being protected in terms of backup, what file shares are being protected, what storage account is being protected, like many things are being part of this one. And the recovery services vault is also helps in disaster recovery, not only from a cloud perspective, but if you have something in on-prem and you are making a one copy of the storage into a local data center, now you want to make one more copy to the cloud. Now, these backup softwares like Veeam, NetBackup, these things can make one copy to the SAN storage in the local data center, and from offline, this can make one more copy to the cloud as a recovery services vault. So they can use recovery services vault, which can help in disaster recovery. So in that case, we can use on-prem data center as a primary site where all the backups are stored, and secondary site or an off-site location where we call it as an, we can use Azure as an off-site location. So what is the advantage of that? If our data center goes down, and in such a case where we are not able to restore it, we still have the backups available in Azure cloud. We can restore the data from the cloud, but yes, there could be some kind of a downtime, and but we can still restore the data. Okay. So that's where it comes there. On-prem to Azure migration. So as part of migrating your on-prem environment like servers, virtual machines to Azure, now you need some kind of an intermediate storage. Now the recovery services will act like an intermediate storage where all these on-prem data can be copied to a recovery services vault, and from there we can create an Azure virtual machine, okay, and bring it up and running. Okay, so this recovery services vault will help us support on-prem to cloud backups, as I said. So we can take the backups from the on-prem to the Azure and directly, and provides a soft delete 14 days. For some reasons, if anybody deletes this recovery services vault or backup data, so Azure will provide a protection of 14 days as a by default. Okay, it means that for some reasons, if anything goes wrong and a human error happens, and by deleting these things, so we can still recover that in a 14 days of time. That is one of the safest measure, or basically the preventive measure to data loss. Okay. So whenever we're thinking about a backup, we're talking about an on-prem migration, we are talking about a disaster recovery, then the one thing which you need to get in mind is a recovery services world. Now, in Azure also, we have regions like we see Central India, West India, South India. Now, all my virtual machines are available in South India. And if I store the backup jobs also in South India, all my backup data, if something goes wrong to the South India, the data center of Azure, now my actual applications got lost and my backup data is also lost. Because Azure is providing you an infrastructure, but not guarantee for your data. Okay. Now that is where the recovery services world can be locally redundant. So what I mean by locally redundant means, if let's say in West US2 region, you have three zones, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. So what happens is then by default, Azure will keep one more copy within the same zone where the recovery services vault exists. So 3 copies will be maintained by default. Okay. So what happens is then within the locally redundant means within the same region, within the same zone, there will be 3 copies which will be maintained. What is the risk with this one? Advantage of this one. The advantage could be cost saving because there will not be any extra cost on this, but as a default feature it provides. And one is the faster recovery because the data is resides in the same region where my source is available. The disadvantage could be like if something goes wrong with this entire data set region of the Azure, then we lost our applications and as well as your backup data. Zone redundant. So zone is basically a physical isolation from the perspective of power, connectivity, and other things. Now, when I mean by zone redundant, within the same region, like West US2 region, it is going to make 3 copies in zone 1 and 1 copy in zone 2. So what is the advantage of this one? So we are making 3 copies in zone 1, so which helps in faster recovery process. If something goes wrong with this zone 1, we still have the data in zone 2, a copy, which we can use it for restoration purpose and which also be helpful for faster restoration purpose. But the disadvantage of this one is that we get into additional cost because the data transfer between the zone 1 and zone 2. So where Azure is going to charge for the data transfer between the zones as part of the backup, and restoration could take a longer time compared to the within the same zone of it. But however, the zone redundant will not help us in the region failure or the location failure. So where we call the South India or in Central India, if the entire Central India goes down, all the 3 zones are down, then my applications and my backup data is also lost. Okay. So we can have a zone redundant for applications as for certain kind of applications. Okay. But like in database applications where data is very crucial, anything, then we need to. Then we have geo-redundant. So in a part of geo-redundant, Azure has something called as a pair regions. Pair regions. So Azure already has a pair regions means a Central India data can be copied to South India, South India data can be copied to West India and South India. Like they've paired it. They say that, okay, a customers of West India can make a data copy to the Central India and to the South India. Similarly, the South India customers who are using the South India region can make a copy of their data to the West India and Central India. So they're called as a paid regions. Now, what advantage geo-redundant? You can make the data replicated across the regions. So 3 copies are being maintained in the local region, and in the target region, there are 3 copies which are being maintained. 3 copies are maintained. So what advantage we have with this one? For some reasons, if the South India region goes down, the entire with all the 3 zones, now I have a backup copies available in West India. I can restore my data. So that is the advantage of using the geo-redundant, but it has some kind of a cost associated because it is not cheap as local redundant, but as we are transferring the data over the connectivities and consuming across the data centers, so there will be an additional cost, this one. Okay. So based on the requirement, we can, during the creation of the recovery services vault, we need to choose whether we want to have a locally redundant, whether we want to have geo-redundant, or zone-redundant. This is a feature which is across the recovery services vault. Now, let's say you don't need the geo-redundant for all the applications because it's going to be expensive. In that kind of situations, we can have multiple recovery services vault created. One recovery services vault with locally redundant, another recovery services vault with zone redundant, another recovery services with geo redundant. If something goes wrong for my database applications or anything, I can restore from geo redundant. If something goes wrong, like a medium, not non-critical applications, or can we go there? And could be non-production or words, I can go for locally redundant. Like that, you can design your backup infrastructure using your recovery services vault. Yeah. Let's see how we can create a recovery vault. So you can search for recovery services vaults, or in the favorites menu, you would be able to find recovery services vault. Based on the usage, sometimes you will find in the favorites, but if you're not using that service, you may not find in the recovery service in the favorites. So create. So I'm giving a vault name. So I'm giving a vault name, and I'm just giving called as an acute recovery services vault. One. I'm just saying a local, so which helps me. So in which region you want to create. So you have to be very careful. So during the creation of this ones, if you're creating a vault in a region and your virtual machines are in another region, then it would take longer time and it would cost you additionally. For a faster backup, so let the recovery vault be in the same region where your resources are existing. Next, redundancy. So do you want to have a locally redundant, or a zone redundant, or a geo redundant? So when you enable a geo redundant, we see cross region restore. So when you enable it, by default, this is disabled. We cannot restore the data as and when required. Okay, from a cross region means that I have a backup copy to this region. If I disable that, I cannot restore it here. A later point of time, I can enable it, but I don't want to allow the operations for the cost purpose. I don't want the users to restore the data to another region. So that kind of situations, we can disable it. But if you want to allow that feature, then you can enable it. So I'm going for a locally redundant. Encryption, the data which resides and the Azure can be encrypted so that we don't want any tampering. So if you want to connect to your network, so you don't want this to be accessible to the public, then you can deny the public access and you connect to the virtual networks. So then this A recovery services vault will be accessible only from that particular networks. Okay, and these application services. Okay. So I'm just creating a review and create. So we have the recovery services vault created. Let's explore this one. So when we go to the recovery services vault, you would see something backup, site recovery, vault securities. Then when you go to the settings, identity networking settings, whatever we see that, protected items, we see backup items, replicated items. As we go on over the series of these courses, we will understand like backup policies, backup infrastructure, and all these things. So this is how you can create an recovery services vault.